and then this bad thing happened, or this bad thing happened and the devil was walking down the street whistling. Just because you have all these accounts doesn't mean it wasn't something that, someone's active imagination didn't feed into someone else's active imagination, or somebody wasn't half in the bag and thought they heard a conversation that never really happened, or happened in the way that they didn't think. And not to say that I believe one way or the other. I have no idea. I'm just saying that, just because you have multiple accounts still doesn't make it true. Eyewitness accounts are some of the worst pieces of evidence there are in a court case.
Amen to that.
and I'm with you. And calling me Mulder is probably true, because I've said on the podcast millions of times, I want to believe. I want to believe so bad, it's not funny. and I kind of come into these things with that angle of wanting to believe. And when I have to leave with, and I just can't, it's some of the saddest things in the world to me. And we've encountered some of that. It's like the skateboard swamp monster. We talked about that. I love that story. I think it's amazing. I think it's interesting. I don't believe it exists, or I just, there's too much separation there in between sightings for me to go, this is a thing. Whereas now, if you want to talk about the Florida skunk ape, I'll talk with you about that all day, because we actually have some, proof on that one. But I want to believe. So yeah, no, if you want to keep me honest and play devil's advocate, please be my guest. I'm good with that. I find it interesting that these people, certain groups of these people, are almost always characterized the same way, as being alien in a sense that they don't quite understand us. They don't quite understand the people they're talking to and dealing with. And I find that fascinating, because it's the same thing when dealing with black-eyed kids, as you get these kids that don't seem to necessarily understand, that it isn't the 1800s and nobody has a telegraph machine anymore. Yeah, or whatever the oddness is. And it makes me think that the actual sightings may be somehow connected. I don't know how entirely, but I think that it may be a connected phenomenon, is what I'm saying. Somehow. Now, that being said, that was 1966. We have other things that we need to talk about. Now, Indrid Cole was first seen on October 16th, 1966, like I said, and I told you about that. He was seen again in, let me read this, Parkersburg, West Virginia, which is around the same area and time the Mothman's about. And the person that he talked to was a gentleman named Woodrow Derenberger. Now, that guy had a lot of interaction with Indrid Cole. And he was driving home on Interstate 77 until he heard a crash. Then an unidentifiable vehicle appeared in front of his truck. He described it as an old-fashioned kerosene lamp chimney, flaring at both ends, narrowing down to a small neck, and then enlarging in a great bulge in the center. The grinning man came out of the vehicle with a dark tan and walked up to Derenberger and telepathically said his name was Indrid Cole, and he meant no harm. Cole said he just wanted to know more about the human race and he would visit Derenberger again. After the encounter, Derenberger stated that Cole revealed he was from the planet Lemulus in the galaxy of Ganymedes. Now, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing all of this right. So that was the second sighting. And he and Derenberger interacted a lot. A lot.
Supposedly. I feel like we need to say supposedly on this.
Well, see, Derenberger, though, has authenticated at least some of his encounters with Indrid Cole.
Okay, how do you authenticate this? Because I think your definition of authentication and mine may be massively different.
Mine is like taking.
How do you authenticate that you had an otherworldly experience with this person?
Because John Keel would get calls from Derenberger. He and Derenberger were friends.
Okay, but that doesn't make it.
And so that's how he met Indrid Cole.
Okay, but wait, you can call anyone and be like, hey, can we do this for a call?
But if I'm going, no, I've met the devil, and you're like, you're crazy. No, he's coming over Tuesday. Please join us. And you come over, and the devil is here in a nice suit, going, hey, how are you? You're like, okay, that's the devil.
Yeah.
You have no choice at that point to accept the devil. So if Darren Berger goes, here, meet my friend, the weird Indrid Cole, and you show up and there's a guy with a pointed face, dark skinned, wearing a shiny suit, you're like, okay, that's Indrid Cole.
It's a weird dude in a shiny suit.
Now, I'm not saying that makes him from, planet Lemulus and the Ganymede. I'm just saying we know that Darren Berger interacted with him.
There was an entity there that you were...
There was someone there that they interacted with. Okay, that's a little different than...
I'm just saying we know Darren Berger wasn't completely up in his own head because he was able to have people meet this guy.
There was an actual person that he was referring to.
But we don't know whether or not this person was scamming him, or maybe he was also a part of the scam.
Exactly. Thank you.
Maybe he and Indrid Cole were scamming John Keel.
Yes.
Or maybe the guy was really good and Bergman and Keel by himself. Hey, do we know if any money exchanged hands or anything about it? Do we know that?
Maybe.
We don't know that. But it seems unlikely, or it seems like at some point somebody would have brought it up.
Maybe.
Or a lot of times people fail to report crimes because they're embarrassed. Hey, look, I wasn't supposed to be in that hotel with that woman because I'm a married man, so I don't know. My clothes just fell off of me. I don't know how I got naked.
The Badger game was big in the 1920s. I get that, and there's a reason that it worked. But the point I'm making is that we know there was at least an entity calling itself Indrid Cole. That's where I'm stopping.
Perfect. I
like you said. We don't know that he came from Lemulus and the Ganymede quadrant. We don't know that. All we know is that there's a being calling itself Indrid Cole, but we don't know much beyond that.
Sure.
Right. And we know he looked odd. We do know that because everybody who saw him mentions how odd he looked. But I look odd. Doesn't mean I'm an alien.
Say.
But we know he looks odd. So we have two facts that we know. We know someone was calling themselves Indrid Cole, and we know he looked odd. Because everybody who saw him was like, yeah, he looks odd.
Right.
So...
I also did a little bit of research and just thinking about what I already knew about Men in Black, and so far as in popular culture. And Men in Black, there's a pretty popular author I've read named F. Paul Wilson, and he's got a series called the Repairman Jack series, and the third book in the series was called Conspiracies, and he had these twins who could have been described as Men in Black. They looked odd, they acted odd, they weren't the good guys, but they were united with us against an even badder guy. So they had ulterior motives, you could say. And they had big sunglasses on, and for the longest time, this person thought they were sunglasses until we realized the frames didn't have lenses, and they had just big gaping eye holes. They didn't have eyes at all. So there's that, and if you want to go there, you can also say Stephen King and his Dark Tower series, if anyone has read that, based on a poem. Roland's pursuing the Man in Black. Who is the Man in Black? The Man in Black is, if you've seen any number of Stephen King movies, if you've seen The Stand, you've seen the Man in Black. Randall Flagg, yeah. I was going to say, that's the Man in Black, at least for the Gunslinger series, and he also appeared in The Stand. So, yeah. Right. So anytime you read a Stephen King book and you come across a person with the initials RF, that's the Man in Black. Whether or not he does something nefarious or he just passes by, that's the Man in Black. Stephen King does it intentional. He's never made a mistake with it, as far as I've seen. But that poem was written, oh boy, I can't remember who it was written by. I was looking at it earlier.
The child where land to the dark tower came, was it Chaucer?
I don't think so. I was looking at it earlier and I forgot the name. But that poem, I thought the guy just wrote the poem. That poem was taken from a line of King Lear written by Shakespeare. And King Lear was originally written about, it's pseudo-historical, and it was by George of Monmouth, and he was supposed to be the first king of Leicester, and he was supposed to be an 8th century king, and I figured, okay, well, who is the actual king of Britain back in the 8th century? And it was just like just a line of unpronounceable names. I was like, all right, I'm getting kind of lost in the weeds here. But it's just funny how, you have all this going back into popular culture, and popular writings, from then till now. Because most people are familiar with some of Stephen King's work, and to find that there's this line that goes all the way back to the BC, 8th century BC. That was just kind of amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, and 8th century BC, if I remember correctly, it wasn't England. It was 100 scattered countries. It was
like Greece wasn't one country. It was a bunch of little countries.
Yeah,
that all
and which is why when the Romans showed up, they were able to sort of go, "This is all of ours," because everybody was so
disjointed.
Yeah, everybody was against each other, so this outside force, well-trained, was able to go, no, this is all ours now. And when they got cut off years later, then it sort of went back to that island of little nations, that and until eventually they were able to conquer enough of it to have one king, which is sort of where the story of Arthur comes from, kind of, sort of, not really. Well, there's certainly some of that appears in the Arthurian legend, but it's not historically accurate. There's so much to go into there and unpack. We would almost need a whole episode for it. But long story short, there was an Arthur, kind of.
Sort of. Not really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got that.
So, yeah. And I'm with you. Like I said, it's commonly believed that Indrid Cole may have actually been an alien entity. There's other people that believe that Darren Berger had something wrong with him. But other people saw Indrid Cole and gave him the same descriptions. Now, the next thing we got to talk about is the Solway Firth Spaceman. Now, before we get into this, everybody knows about the Solway Firth Spaceman.
We do?
Yeah, you do, but you don't know that you do.
Oh,
Years ago, a guy in Sweden, using a very specific kind of camera, took a picture of his daughter. Now, he swore it was only his daughter in the shot. And what appears standing behind her appears to be a spaceman.
Okay.
And this was in Solway Firth, which is a plane... and plane Plain, not Plane, a plane in England. Now, what some people think they figured out, and it may well be true, is that the picture of the spaceman was actually his wife from behind, standing behind their daughter, that he couldn't see because of the way this specific camera sort of frames its shots. So he didn't notice his wife standing behind her. So when he takes the picture, it only looks like a spaceman because it's her from behind because she's wearing a bun. And so it looks like a spaceman, or what we think of as a spaceman, but it's just, it's a trick. It's camera hooey. I'm not sure. But so it's important to me to put out that the Solway Firth Spaceman, near as we can figure, has been debunked.
Okay.
And I can live with that. Doesn't affect my story, other than at one point he gets picked up by these two men in black suits, black hats, black ties, do not speak the language very well, who are very interested in this picture that he's taken and want him to stop talking about it. And when he refused, they dropped him off on the side of the highway and left him there.